So, hi guys. I think then we can probably get started while some people are still joining. So, thank you to everybody who has already joined here. This webinar will be one of the webinars we focus not on UgCS itself, but on products which, so to say, live around it. And I think maybe one product we haven't really covered enough is UgCS Mapper. So some of you might know of this, you know of its existence, maybe you have even used it, maybe not. But I would say the aim of today's webinar is that I just want to explain where can UgCS Mapper be beneficial and how can you integrate it together with your existing workflow. And basically, yeah, how can it help you do even better surveys, especially in areas where maybe the maps might not be really up to date. So then let's jump into it. Firstly, a bit of housekeeping before we start. So I expect this webinar probably won't be as long as the others. I think this could be up to about 45 minutes with the Q&A session included. After the webinar, in case you don't have time to stay up until the end, we'll send you the webinar recording to all registered attendees. Plus, in some time, it will also be available on our YouTube channel, UgCS TV. So please put all of your questions in the Q&A section here in Zoom chat. So I know from some webinars, some of you like to put them in the chat, but please put them in the Q&A. It'll be way easier for us to handle them later. And maybe if we don't have the time to give you an answer during the webinar, we can get in touch with you after and talk. So today's agenda will be, firstly, I'll tell a bit about what's new in UgCS in case you have missed a few of the latest versions. And I'll also introduce, well, the main product around which we have today's webinar, so UgCS Mapper. Then also I'll show some demo data set as well as a report. So basically you can see what is the output of Mapper and as well how can Mapper be integrated together with UgCS. And at the end, we'll also have some Q&A section depending on how many questions will I have from you. So yep, I think let's get started. If I see some questions during the webinar, I might also answer some of them while we're going. So I think then let's get started. So firstly, about some new features in UgCS. So now with UgCS 4.18, what we added is firstly now we released LiDAR tools for Autopilot and PX4 drones. What this means is that LiDAR area, LiDAR corridor, as well as the pattern tool, they are now unlocked for these drones. So main implication from this is that now when you need to plan flights using LiDAR's field of view angle, you can now do this for these drones as well. Previously, this was only for DJI Enterprise level drones, which can carry LiDAR. So M600, M300, and M200, and M350. But yeah, now LiDAR tools are available for all drones, essentially. And also we added the point of interest action for DJI Enterprise drones, which are connected through Pilot 2 connection. So M350, M300, M30, and Mavic 3 Enterprise series. Yeah, see, there's one question about what about Mavic 3 multispectral? Yes, this also means multispectral. So typically we write Mavic 3 Enterprise series, but just so you know, so among these 4 drones, we also include M30, M30T, and under Mavic 3 Enterprise series, this is M3E, M3T, the thermal version, and M3M, or the Mavic 3 multispectral. So yeah, that's about the new features in the latest version. And in case you missed about the previous one, in the previous version also we added support for the DJI M350 drone, as well as new parent following mode, Smart AGL, which can be quite useful for those of you flying up high in the mountains. And this allows you to follow even vertical cliff surfaces, as well as we also added adjustable corner radius for all parts of the mission. So now you can make sure that your DJI drone can fly using the adaptive bank turn, and you can also visualize all of these trajectories. So that's sort of briefly about what's new. Full release notes you can always find on our website. So if you go to ugcs.com/download, then there on downloads, if you scroll down, you will be able to see full release notes with all fixes, changes, new features, improvements, and so on. Okay, now that this is sort of out of the way, I think we can probably jump in a bit more detail into UgCS Mapper and what can Mapper do. So overall, what is UgCS Mapper? So this is also one of our products, which we have on our web shop, and which we have already been selling for quite some years, but we haven't really been focused that much on promoting it since, the primary thing is UgCS. But I think Mapper can be very useful in many different scenarios. So it's basically intended as a lightweight software which you can use for drone image processing. So this allows you to create 2D maps. So basically you can create from orthophoto, you can create maps and also create elevation models in the field. I would probably put more focus though on the mapping part, since let's keep in mind one thing. So Mapper, it's mainly intended to be a very quick software which can do one purpose. You can create maps when you are in the field, when you are offline, and this can help you get more detailed maps, which you can then use for your flight planning. So let's jump into a bit on why specifically Mapper. So what are the advantages and what are the features of Mapper? So firstly, I would say the Mapper makes map processing very simple. And again, this is mainly intended for in-field map processing. So here you can see also a screenshot of Mapper. I'll also show it to you later, but I think screenshots are also useful in this case, so we don't have to wait multiple minutes until it completes the processing. So you can see the workflow is very simple. So when you have Mapper open, you simply need to select the directory where you have the images from the drone. Next, you select the output directory of where you want these images to, where you want the result from the processing to be stored. Then here there will be a process button. In this screenshot, you can see it's already in action, but you'll see in a moment. So there's the process button. You press on that, and then the map processing starts. If your camera is not yet calibrated, so if Mapper hasn't yet done any image processing with that specific camera, it will first process a smaller data set, and after that do a larger data set. Typically, the processing time, I would say, is somewhere around 10 minutes, but it can even be shorter. I think you'll see one screenshot here where I flew a quick orthophoto today near our office, and the map processing took about 5 minutes. And I see there's one sort of question about PC requirements. So in this case, today I was using MacBook 14 Pro, but Mapper doesn't really have super high requirements. But I think as long as you have some more or less decent field computer with let's say quad-core processor and like some 8 gigs to 16 gigs of RAM, I think you should be fine. It doesn't really require any sophisticated video card, nothing like that. So you can also use it on computer without a video card. Because the main idea here is that you can use it in the field and you can use it to create maps quickly, which you can then use for creating more detailed flight plans. So let's then go further. So yeah, what's the workflow overall? So number one, you can plan and fly some orthophoto mission at a higher altitude. For this, you can, there's a few options. Either you can simply use DJI Pilot 2 to create some orthophoto mission, or what I did today is I simply created the mission from the office in UgCS. Then today I was using the M300 drone, with the H20 camera. And I didn't, by the way, even have to take out the laptop in the field. I simply synchronized the flight route to DJI Pilot 2, and then I just took out the drone, took out the remote controller, and just launched the drone and waited some 5-10 minutes until it collected the images. So then once you are done with the image collection, you just import all the images in the laptop, and then in Mapper, like I explained before, you just select the input directory, output directory, and click on process. So made basically as simple as possible. So in this case, you can actually see that for processing 185 images, this took 5 minutes and 40 seconds on this hardware, which I have, which I think is 16 gigs of RAM, Mac M1 Pro chip. This by the way works on both on Windows and MacBook as well. So yeah, and then once you are done, one really cool thing I think is that you can import the orthophoto as well as the terrain model directly into UgCS. So there's no need to even browse through the files. You can simply click here. You see there's the publish button. So yeah, basically you just click on the publish button, and then this will automatically publish the result to UgCS, where you can then I'll show you in a moment, but you can basically see it in map layers under the map. You'll see the map overlay as well as the terrain there as well. So also when Mapper is done processing, you will see a report similar to this. So also I can show you this a bit later fully. This is just a screenshot from that. But so yeah, this is just from another quick short survey. So you can see where the images are, which images were processed here. These gaps that you see here, these are from the trees, since depending on how high you fly, the trees might not get fully in the end result. But you can see most of this area, this is in here, and this is already way better than what you would have normally in Google Maps. And so now we can this is also another screenshot from the how do you publish it UgCS. Just wanted to put this here, so again we don't need to process any dataset live, although if you want I can also try to do that and show you. But yeah, essentially once the processing is done, you'll see this window, so you can then choose how to publish the map and how to publish the terrain. You can already enter some name for the layer, and so then this will be the same name which will be used in UgCS. And this is actually the result. So you can see this is from the mission which I flew today. What you can see here on the right side, and on the left side, this is the view from Google imagery, which you can see at that specific location. So again, this is just one example of what Mapper can do, but I have actually a few stories on how Mapper has helped us in the past. First one was when here in another location in Latvia, we had to fly. This is actually when we had to fly with a ground penetrating radar, so we had to fly quite low above the ground. And we were seeing some strange anomalies in the data, and we're not sure why, because we were flying over this wheat field, I believe it's called in English. And when we flew over that, we saw some really strange anomalies in the GPR data. And we decided, okay, let's fly an orthophoto, let's see what's there, just to see if maybe there's something above the surface. And so we did that. I don't have the data set now because I was looking for it, couldn't really find it, but it's probably somewhere. So if you're interested, I can try to look it up. But basically, it was like a wheat field with the tractor tracks going through, which, since we were basically located somewhere around here, let's say on the road, we couldn't really see that. So we couldn't see inside the field. And just as well, there could have been some other objects there in the field. And only when we had this map processed in UgCS Mapper, when we imported that, then we saw, okay, so actually, those points which we detected before with the sensor, they perfectly match up with what we saw in the data. So we simply had some tractor tracks going through, and because the pattern of the wheat has changed because of the trails, this is actually what we encountered. But I would say Mapper can be useful in many different cases, similar ones as well. The second story of how Mapper really helped us is actually from Greenland. So some of you might know that we did an expedition to Greenland in 2019. That's when I was there as well. I would really love to share that imagery with you, but it's under NDA, so I can't really share that specific location. But basically, if you imagine that we were in a place that was fully covered with snow. So maybe we can just quickly, I'll show UgCS screen to you. I hope you can see that. So if we go to some similar area like that, we can also just now move somewhere to Greenland. So you can see in many cases when you need to fly in these really remote areas, when you want to create very detailed missions, everything you see here will be snow in many cases. So everything will just be white. But at the same time, the terrain is changing there, always changing. So when we were there, initially, we had to build the tents. We had to dig through the snow, and so everything was more or less white like this. But then later on, the snow melted, and we were kind of sitting on rocks actually. And in that sense, also since we had some campsite there, we knew already, we had some point of reference, but this point of reference wasn't really visible here on the map, since only when we turned on the drone, when we turned on the remote controller, only then we saw where we were and where the drone was. So that location was super useful for us to be able to plan a mission, stitch it together, plan a mission, fly it, and then stitch all the imagery together, and then have this way more detailed ortho mosaic, which we could then already import into UgCS and use for flight planning. And obviously there we had also no internet connection. So I think also this is a very good case of how Mapper really saved us and made it way, way easier, since we could do everything offline, didn't use a lot of computer battery to do that. So worked out very well for us in that case. And I believe for many of you, this could also work and help a lot. So if we just quickly then jump back into the presentation. So yeah, then I just want to mention some benefits about Mapper. So number one is that when you plan the flights, after you have some data already collected and imported into UgCS, this means you can plan flight taking into account the actual situation in that area instead of the historic situation. Some examples could include, maybe there are some trees at some point which you might not even see from the road. Maybe there's some area where the trees have already been cut down. Maybe there's some machinery somewhere sitting if you're flying above locations such as a forest. If you're flying in some other places where there's there has been some construction, especially if it's more recent, then in the Google imagery, you might not yet see the structure that's there. But in reality, it will be there. And so if you are able to get this more accurate map from Mapper, then this can help a lot. So that's point number one. Number two is that you are able to create maps in the field with ease, even without having an internet connection or having very powerful hardware. Since, like I mentioned, Mapper doesn't really require to have a GPU. Of course, you need to have a somewhat modern laptop, but I think most laptops that people take into the field, these should be plenty powerful enough. And if your laptop can handle UgCS, it can also handle UgCS Mapper. So yep, the point number three would be that you can also visualize obstacles which are not visible on the base map. This is kind of already what I mentioned. And yep, adapt to changing environment. This is maybe more from the example in Greenland, where yeah, the snow can melt, a lot of things can change. So for instance, also you can imagine maybe when there has been or there is a flood in some area, then when you need to fly drone missions, you need to plan them, it might look a lot different. What you see on the satellite imagery and what you see when you make a quick map of the area. This can also help in search and rescue operations and many others, I believe, as well. And yeah, the final thing here would be that Mapper integrates quite seamlessly with UgCS. So it's very simple for map processing, very simple workflow. No training really needed for operators because it's just so simple. And yeah, then once you have it, then you just press on publish, and this is all imported into UgCS. So now let's maybe jump a bit more into the demo. Oh, yeah, I see there's a few questions also. So does this require geotagged images for this to work? So yes, for Mapper, you do need to have images with geotags. However, actually, coming back to the example of when we were flying in Greenland, actually, so first I thought we would have geotagged images because initially we were actually flying with the Phantom 4 drone. But apparently in that location, our Phantom 4, it had some issue because we flew the first route, which was also just simple photogrammetry, and keep in mind, this was like back in 2019. I think it was Phantom 4, not Phantom 3. I think it was Phantom 4, yeah. So, and at one point during the end of a survey line, the drone just decided it's gonna keep flying away, you know. Nowadays, those issues we have kind of forgotten about, since, you know, with advances in drone technology using M300s and so on, it's way more reliable. But yeah, so the drone essentially, in short, had some issue, and then we couldn't get geotagged images. So what did we do? We had a GoPro camera, which it didn't have. It was like a GoPro 3, I believe, which didn't have any possibility to geotag images automatically. So we strapped the GoPro to an M600 drone. We flew over the area, and then actually in UgCS, there's a bit of a hidden feature which allows you to geotag images. Since this is here, we can actually already go here to the telemetry player. By the way, I hope you can see the screen. Hope everything's okay. Yeah, okay, yeah, everything seems to be good. So yeah, basically here in the telemetry player, when you have some telemetry track, then might need to have some drone in here. Let's maybe do this one. So you can see actually when you select the drone, which has some telemetry record, so for instance, the M300 here, even though there's, I think this wasn't from today's flight, this is just when the drone was turned on briefly. But in any case, so here, if you click on geotagging, this will open up this window. And so in this geotagging window, sorry that this feature is kind of hidden away, but this is here. So in case you're using some camera that doesn't do the geotagging automatically, you can open this up and you can browse to select the images which you have. If necessary, you can also add some camera time offset. And yep, then you can write all the geotags to the images. So this will basically synchronize drone's telemetry with the images that you took, and this will geotag the images. And then this will make it a lot easier for you to process these images and stitch them together. At least that's what worked for us. So that's one thing. And another thing, kind of while we are here, is more in the mission editor side, but there's also an option here in UgCS where you can show image centers. So you can go to some folder which has a bunch of images. You can select all of them. Oh, sorry, just now selected only one, so you can see how this looks like for one image. And so you can now do similarly for others as well. So if we go here, then show image centers, then I can select all images, hit select. And yeah, so now you can see all of them in here, so you can see where are the images. This is also actually useful before you do the image processing, if you want to make sure, you know, that images of all locations are here. So yeah, that's what you can do with this. But now let's maybe jump a bit into the Mapper software. So I have Mapper actually open here, and I can also maybe share to you some exact reports of a Mapper processing. So like I mentioned, so this is very simple to use. You have number one, number two. Number one, you select directory where you have the images. So you just select the folder. And then number two, you select the output folder. And then after that, you can click here on process. So the processing will take typically 5-10 minutes, but this does depend on the size and on the computer you have. So this can as well also take longer if you have a lot of images. So you can see here for 146 images, took about 5 minutes. So if you have, for instance, like 300 images, you can expect this could be about 10 minutes time to process all of that. And so now we can go to where actually I have this specific map. So I believe this was here. So we can take a look at the images first, images which were gathered. So these are the images near the office. Today, by the way, also, we had demo days for our integrated systems. So had a bunch of people here, a bunch of cars. So essentially, this is the data set we're working with here. And then I'll show you the result from Mapper. So I believe this is this one here. So let's open up the report. So you can see this is how it looks like. And so these green ones, these are the images, image locations, which kind of matches up with what is in here in UgCS. And then, so you can see some more summary of this. So what's the total area? What's the average calculated GSD? I believe GSD for this flight was 3.5, but yeah, the calculated one is a bit lower, processing time around 5 minutes, as well as it shows the terrain elevation range. So Mapper actually does also attempt to construct some 3D model of the terrain from that. Whether this is accurate or not, you can also be the judge, so to say. But I would say with Mapper, I wouldn't put too much focus on the terrain, which it does, even though in some cases it could help if there's some larger obstacles on the ground. Yeah, so here you can also see how it looks like in color. So if we colorize this, and you can also even switch to wireframe view here. So it looks quite cool, I think. And yeah, then basically what we have here, we can easily then import into UgCS. So if we go quickly back to what we have here in the folder, so in here, so this is the result of the Mapper processing. So you see it firstly creates this orthophoto, the MB tiles file, and then also creates orthophoto TIFF and the terrain.tiff file. And so both of these, after the processing is done in Mapper, both of these are imported into UgCS automatically if you press on the publish button. So I'll just quickly hide away the image centers, and then we can take a look at how this looks like. So if we go now here to map layers, so this is the result, which I have from Mapper, which I just showed you. And so now you can see how this looks like. And we can, for instance, zoom into some specific area, take a look at how this looks like. So we can see it's quite detailed. I would say Mapper can sometimes struggle with some, somewhere in the corners you might see. So you go here, you can see it does struggle a bit where there's taller trees or when it has to process some, even though on the cars here, it also did a decent job on some cars. We can see there's some tiny issues, but again, so main purpose of this is that this attempts to create a map which can be used for flight planning. So this isn't meant to be delivered to customers as the end result. This is mainly meant to help operators in the field. And this does this job, I think, quite well. So now if we zoom in here, you can also see the level of detail. And what I like to do, what's always interesting, is if we now take the overlay, take it away, you can see that we are basically looking at what looks like 4 to 10 pixels, right? And so yeah, imagine if there would be maybe some field with some more detailed structures, something like that, then Mapper would give us this information of, okay, hey, there's something there, which you can take into account when you're doing flight planning, or if there's some structure you need to fly around, maybe there's some structure you need to scan, then also Mapper would allow you to have access to this information rather than having to rely on these very, very blurred images which you get from Google. Yeah, this is just one sample data set, and then we can also, by the way, look at here, this example, we have this road on how this looks like before. And so in some cases, you can see basically there's almost no detail when you try to see this without using Mapper. So here you can see what are the trees like, you can see where is the tree line exactly. And if you remove that, then very, very unclear, very vague image. So especially since many places on the Earth, we don't really have very accurate data. I think Mapper can help drone pilots quite a lot. Oh yeah, I see one question is it possible to map thermal images? Unfortunately, no. So I can also talk a bit about Mapper limitations. It is not possible to map thermal. We have actually had this request for quite some time, so we can consider maybe adding this feature as well. And second is Mapper also, it doesn't stitch vertical facades. So if you just want to fly, if you're flying horizontally, Mapper can handle that no problem. But for vertical facades, it's better to use some other solution since Mapper doesn't really, it's not the tool for that, in short. Yeah, also, I see the question from Erez about support for the GPU for faster processing. And yes, so Mapper does have hardware acceleration. So if you do have a GPU, well, it's not required, it will help when you will be doing the processing. So this will speed up the time it takes to process the video. sorry, the imagery. Yep, this was one of the results, and then also I can share another one. This actually, let's first maybe try to find the correct folder for that. I believe it's this one. So you can take a look at another report generated by Mapper. Let's zoom in a bit. So I can see it, same location, but just a bit of a different time. And also I can see how many images were here. So 160 images. And also I can see Mapper does attempt to construct the terrain. So it does see where there are some taller trees. This here in the center, this I believe is the office building. But again, I'd say it's not super good for creating the terrain model, but the main focus here would be creation of the map. So we can now go here, and I believe actually this map I already have imported into UgCS, and so then we can go ahead and use this then as the overlay. Oh, sorry, I think it's another one. So actually what we can now do is we can import the one from Mapper. So now let's click here on upload. And I think this was this one, processed, and this orthphoto.tif file. So now it's uploading. So let's wait for some time for it to finish. But yeah, I've noticed even we've tried a lot of mapping software, and typically all of them, no matter if it's Mapper or something else, they do struggle a bit with the roof of our office because due to the high reflectivity, I find that most of the software that does processing does not really like that for some reason. Maybe some of you know how to fight with that, and what are the solutions when you have to map out some reflective surfaces. But no, it's quite a widespread issue, I think. Okay, so let me see, while we're here, some other questions which I have. So I see many of you did put the questions here in the chat, though, but I'll go through the chat questions as well. So yeah, firstly, is Mapper included in UgCS software? So answer is no. Mapper is not included in standard UgCS. So Mapper can be purchased separately, and in the presentation, I'll also show where you can get that and for how much. So about thermal photos, I answered as well. So so yeah, another question is, sounds like UgCS can process orthophoto like Agisoft. I wouldn't say UgCS can process. So we have another software Mapper for processing orthophoto. But again, just to maybe reiterate a bit what I already mentioned. So Mapper, it's mainly intended for in-field processing. So Mapper isn't really meant to create results which then get delivered to the end customer. But at the same time, if the results need to be very simple, so if you just need to make some very simple orthophotos so the customer, let's say, can see what's going on, then Mapper can also be used for that if it's not required to deliver very, very detailed reports with high accuracy. But where Mapper excels is if you need to use this offline, if you need a very simple workflow and don't want to spend a lot of time on the data processing and just want to do some quick data processing from your field laptop, so you can use this data later for flight planning. So then let's see. Yeah, another question about the facade capture. So also just to clarify, so Mapper cannot be used for mapping out the facade. Mapper is mainly for creating orthophoto. Speaking of which, by the way, we can now import this result here into UgCS, and then we can zoom in a bit to see what we have. Interesting that the color of all the cars on that day was more or less the same. But yeah, so we can also, by the way, compare certain place over time. So let's say if we go here on the map, then so this is what was taken, I believe, was this a year ago? Could be. And then we can change this. Also very interesting how you can compare the results over time. So how a certain area has changed. So let's do this. For instance, here you can see that this area is now already a bit different. You know, there's some stuff over here. So yeah, interesting to see the differences and also useful for flight planning, I would say. So that's about that. And I think now maybe I want to just quickly show you some settings which you can change in the Mapper. and how this works typically. So we'll just move UgCS here a bit out of the way, and then here, if we go into mapper settings, so you can see we have certain list of cameras which already have been calibrated. So typically when you first process a data set with some camera which you have not yet used, it will process a smaller data set up to 100 images. And then after that, it will process the full data set. But that's only required the first time when you use this with a fresh camera. Here for the output, you can select what you need. So there's MB tiles, or Mapbox tiles, then map geotiff and terrain geotiff. If you, for instance, don't need the terrain, then also you can speed up the processing this way by unchecking that. For processing, you can choose between two types of exposure correction methods, either histogram equalization or color correction, or none. In this case, I was using the histogram equalization for the dataset which I showed you. Then some image size for features extraction. So this is for also understanding mainly for photogrammetry purposes. Then yeah, about the GeoServer, Mapper is also using that. This is about the hardware acceleration. So in case you have GPUs, then like I mentioned, so this does utilize them. And then yeah, some other settings about license, support, and language as well. So yeah, that's basically what you get with Mapper and how you can process and create maps. So that's actually most of the things I want to cover. We can then briefly jump back to the presentation that I have here, and so let's go here, and then yep. So last thing. So you asked about Mapper licenses, where you can get that, and so on. So Mapper is available on our site. So if you also just go ugcs.com/mapper, you'll end up on the Mapper's landing page where you can read through that. But in short, the license options are, we have the perpetual license for Mapper for 190 euros. And then there's the monthly subscription as well for 49 euros a month. Then here I have actually this landing page open, so you can read a bit more about different benefits, how it works. Another useful thing, which I forgot to mention in the presentation, is that Mapper, it also does support stitching of multispectral images. So Mapper can also be used for agriculture. So you can go through the site, so mapper.ugcs.com. You can see the videos, read more about it, but what Mapper can do. And yeah, so if you then click here on, for instance, buy now, you'll be taken to our web shop where we have the Mapper perpetual license, and you can just add it to cart here and purchase it. So yeah, that's actually mainly it, what I wanted to tell you about Mapper. So if you want, you can also scan this QR code here. And now I'll go through some questions which we have. And while I'm doing that, if you have anything else you want to ask me, then feel free to do that, and then I'll try to answer these questions live. So I'll mark in some questions which I have already answered. So yeah, about geotagged images, hope it was useful, because I know there are a lot of these more hidden things inside of UgCS, which can be very useful for some people. So this also I think answered. Oh, another question from Jeremiah is about what's the overlap between images, which I would recommend for Mapper for map creation. I would say that probably starting from 70 and 70 overlap. At least that's what I would like to use, and not only with Mapper, with other software as well. So here in UgCS, I know some of you are already UgCS pilots, but in case maybe you haven't used it or haven't used it that much. So then here, actually, this is the photogrammetry route, which I flew today. And so here you can see, you can set the forward and side overlaps. Sorry, it's a bit too small. I can increase the UI scale a bit, so maybe it's a bit easier for you guys to read. So yeah, let's go here. And yeah, so for this one, yeah, the forward overlap I used was 80, side overlap I used was 70. And in GCS, if you go here, you will always be able to see how many shots will be taken during a certain flight, number of waypoints, passes, and so on, and yeah, how often will the images be taken. So again, main idea here is when you go to the field, or even before you do that, you can just quickly create some mapping mission at a higher altitude. So this one, I flew at altitude of 97 meters or GSD 3.5 with the DJI H20 camera. You can also see the elevation window, which probably now because of these higher screen scaling is a bit hard to see. So sorry about that. But yeah, so typically I fly at higher altitude when I just need to create maps. So this flight, it took about 9-10 minutes in total. And yeah, processing also then took about 5 to 10 minutes. So especially if you know you'll be spending some time on the site, I think this can be quite useful to do. So what else? Oh yeah, so about licenses again. So Mapper has its own license, and Mapper is a separate product. So Mapper is not included in standard UgCS licenses. But if you, for instance, have either UgCS Pro or Expert or something else, then you can also just head on over to our web shop, grab UgCS Mapper, get the license for that, and so then you will also be able to use Mapper for mapping purposes. And also, by the way, for the download is available on our main UgCS page. So if you just go here, then under download, you see here we have the UgCS Mapper. So here you can download the UgCS Mapper for whichever platform you need, or mainly Windows and macOS. And if you also need to use it for processing multispectral imagery for agriculture, then you can also download the Mapper tools, which can be installed there on top. Yep, I want here, by the way, I can see we have the hardware requirements. So yeah, minimum RAM is 4 gigs. Now I would say probably 8 gigs would be ideal, and Intel Core i5 would be the recommended CPU. But yeah, 16 gigs of RAM, Core i5 or better, and preferably graphical card because it will then work a bit faster, but you can also use this without. I know DJI Terra, they have this requirement where you need the graphics card, but yeah, for Mapper, it's not really required. And yeah, I think that's basically it for today's webinar. So in case you guys have some more questions, you can get in touch with me. We also, by the way, have UgCS Facebook group. So if you are on Facebook, you can also, if you are on Facebook and you are not yet in our group, you can go there and just search UgCS users group. You should be able to find it. So you can join it. So there, sometimes we share some information even before releases, some hints. You can chat with me there directly as well, and chat with other UgCS users, and yeah, discuss certain things, ask your questions, and also be the first ones to get information about new releases. So yeah, for today's webinar, then that's it. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for listening, and then see you in the next one.